Hello, everybody. Welcome to ITHACON 2021. This panel is our Conventions During COVID panel. We're going to be discussing the current practices at conventions at the moment. Obviously, this past year has been pretty unexpected, and it's probably the first time in my or Taylor's life, and probably most of our other panelists, uh, that I can remember where every aspect of life has had to kind of been reworked. Probably not since 9/11 has anything really been that way. So conventions are definitely something that you kind of need that live aspect for. So definitely one of the more difficult aspects to transform into COVID, but we saw plenty of attempts. Some were pretty good, and some didn't work out so well. So we're going to talk to a couple speakers today who have some experience in those fields. And yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to just introduce our guests today. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. We have Mike Armstrong, Vice President of Read Expo. Mike, very esteemed. Mike was event. You have, I believe you were on the Bleeding Cool Top 100 Power List.
Was wow. We dug that one out. Yeah, that was good.
Esteemed. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Great to see you, and great to see you, Darylyn and Martha.
Awesome.
You too.
Martha is an event producer and consultant. She's the founder and president of Mad Event Management. You produce large-scale events and conferences. You're involved in.
I used to.
Oh, you used to? Okay. Currently, and I believe you're working on Long Beach Comic-Con, correct?
That's right.
Long Beach Comic Expo, and New Jersey Comic Expo.
That's on hiatus, but I also produce C3 Comic Creator Conference.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And we also have Darlene here with us. She's a researcher, educator, and producer in the live events field. Former co-professor of the ITHACON class. Your research it pertains to children's entertainment. Is that correct?
Well, currently it does. And just to clarify, my name's Darlene. It's okay. I've been called worse. But yeah, my current research is on how children and families experience comics conventions in particular. So identifying different experiences, and it's kind of been a nice opportunity, unfortunate as it may be, that we can take a pause and take a look at the past to look to the future.
Gotcha. And you also run Comics in My Life?
Yeah, Comics in My Life is my new venture, delving a little bit into hybrid events.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, we're going to start this off. The first question, we're going to start with a little bit of a general question. What have you guys been seeing in the industry the past year? That could pertain to particular software, particular events, online platforms that are being used to create these events. How have you seen, just generally in a broad sense, how do you think the transition from live events to virtual events has gone? You can talk about whether or not you think it's a positive. There's been some positives, there's been some negatives. Just kind of a general overview of how this shift has gone the past year.
Yeah, I can kick it off. Like, I feel like what we've watched is a lot of testing and iterating. I don't know that anyone's got it right, and that's myself included. Like, we've been at ReadPop, we've put on a half dozen what I would call "quote unquote" virtual events, but I don't think that we've got the equation right by any means. And I feel like if you look at the landscape of people who have done it pretty well, I would say that everyone points to DC Fandom as being probably the most cohesive, best produced one that I think we've all seen. But I also think that it's a lot easier to do that when you control the IP, and when there's the budgets of Warner Brothers behind that. So for folks in my shoes and folks in Martha's shoes, and I don't want to put words in Martha's mouth, I think it's certainly been a challenge, and we're all itching to get back to live events. But we also know that this really isn't going away anytime soon. I think any event that we look at in the next 18 months is going to have some component of a hybrid event, and it's on us to get it as right as we possibly can, because nothing's been perfect so far.
Yeah, I would add that there's a distinction between live and in-person events. Some events have been live, they're just not in person live. So, and like you said, Mike, not everyone, it's kind of like the Wild West now. You've got some fans coming out of the woodwork, especially those first 3 months, right as lockdown was happening. It was like the Wild West. You had fans coming up with their own platforms and using Twitch and Discord, and it's just like a melee of people trying to figure it out. What do you think, Martha?
Yeah, I kind of like the Wild West. I think that a good time to innovate, and I do agree with Mike that some version of hybrid virtual is going to stay with us for a long time. There are people who are terrified to go back into crowds, no matter vaccine, no vaccine, they're just afraid. And to go back to the Javits Center or the Long Beach Convention Center with tens of thousands of people, that is very intimidating for attendees, but also for me as a show organizer. There are a lot of layers as a business owner. There are a lot of layers of risk in that proposition. And so, but your question was, what have I been seeing in the industry? And I could go on all day about what I just started to say, but let me back up and say, there are over 200 virtual event platforms that have sprung up over the course of the last 12 months, which is remarkable. And that's the Wild West piece. And some of them were really good, and some of them will stick around, and that's too many. So some are going to go away. But I saw the same thing that Mike said. I saw some that fell flat. And here's my opinion. It's because we're a visual medium and we like to look and touch and talk to people. We can go online and look at things all day long. We already do. We have plenty of digital assets already available to us. The reason we go to comic conventions is for the interaction in the community. We have access to everything that we need online already. And so what we're doing, Mike and I as event producers, what we're doing is we're curating that content for you, which is a great service, but that's not the same thing as producing an event the way we do. So it's a disconnect, right? It's not the same. When you're producing a virtual event, you're really just curating some content. When we're putting on a live event, we're actually fostering an entire community.
And we're not good content curators, like in the grand scheme of the internet.
Right.
Like you can just go to a search bar and type in anything that you'd ever wanted to see, and you can watch like a really compelling hour panel or 5-minute snippet of something that somebody who is a professional digital content creator could go and do.
That's
like
right.
we're what I love about events, and it's that the spontaneous, like you're gonna just stumble upon an interaction, or you're gonna see something that you'll never be able to see again, and that's what's beautiful about attending an event. But when you're competing with like YouTube or Google or the internet, like you're never going to win. You can
That's
try
right.
to create content, but somebody could already go find something that's been created. It's experiencing that content with other people that makes a Comic-Con what it is. It's not sitting at your screen and watching a 7-minute mindless clip of something.
100%. Yeah.
So neither of you have seen anything that has been engaging?
Not Not produced by us.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's engaging stuff out there, but it's been produced by professional digital producers. And that's my point. And Mike's agreeing with me that there are people who do this for a living, produce digital content. And that's not what we do. We put together people into convention centers or into, if we're smaller, into ballrooms or meeting rooms. And that's the magic to us. That's what makes us excited. We love to put them together in real life. Putting it together in a digital format, it gets messy. Did any of you look at any of the really large scale? Not to take anything away from what Mike and his team did in New York Comic Con, it's a huge undertaking, or what San Diego Comic Con did virtually. I was confused.
Yeah.
You can't replicate what we do on a convention center floor in a digital environment. You have to think about it differently. And I don't think we pivoted our mindset fast enough to do that. We could, if somebody came and said, guess what, you're never going to be able to meet like that again, then we would figure it out. I'm confident. But in the short window that we had, Mike, how long did you have to decide if you were going to be able to do New York Comic Con or not?
We knew within a period of kind of 2 months. So I think we knew around June that we weren't going to be able to do something. But if you take a look at kind of the behind the scenes, like we needed to go create a new brand, we needed to go create a new website, we needed to build a lot of stuff in order to facilitate what we did facilitate. And like I said, it was good. It was good. Like the team left it feeling good about it. But if you look at exhibitor NPS, they were not happy. If you look at fan NPS, they were underwhelmed. They appreciated it. They felt like they were part of something, but not in the same way. Going back real quick, I think if you were to look at somebody who I think got it close, it was CCXP based out of Brazil. I think they did a really nice job with the level of content, the production value, the interactive stuff that they did as a result of being in that community. But again, consider that CCXP was born out of a media company. It was born out of it like it was born out of a website. And they think a lot differently than somebody who is an events producer. We have a media agency, we have a media part of our business over here, but it's still not really ingrained as much as it should be into the DNA of ReadPop. So if I was going to give one example of somebody I thought did it really well, I would say it was CCXP, but there's still a long way to go.
Awesome. All right, Taylor, do you want to move on to the next topic?
Of course. So we kind of touched on this in our last discussion, but just moving to what specifically you all have been doing in the events you've produced, whether you've employed like different strategy, like what kind of strategies have you employed? What kinds of practices have you been like implementing as we navigate this?
I think the thing that's been most important on our side is facilitating commerce for our exhibitors. And if you look at the exhibitor base that Martha's events and ReadPop events have, it's a lot of small businesses, it's a lot of artists who depend on conventions for their livelihood. And one of the main things that we set out to do when we started launching this was give them an opportunity to facilitate commerce. And again, I will say that we did not do that well. It's frustrating when we have to send somebody to 25 different websites in order to find the art from 25 different people. That's just not a good fan journey or a good customer experience whatsoever. So we are building stuff that's going to help facilitate that better in the future. But I think we went into this thinking, let's build a stopgap for our exhibitors. And let's get them somewhat solvent on the year, but there's really no way to replicate the amount of money that they would make at an LBCC or a New York Comic Con. So that I think was one of the most frustrating things. But we're also, we're continuing to iterate and we're continuing to build. Like I said, we've done 6 virtual events. And the first one we did was in March to replace Emerald City Comic Con. And what we did then versus what we're capable of doing now, based on the investments that we've made along the way, are totally different. Like I look back on that fondly, but I also look back on that like, man, we bootstrapped that together as best as we could, and it was fine, but there's so much more that can be done in the space.
in terms of practical matters, the Martha, you spoke to this a bit, you know, the liability and the concerns that go around it. You know, there's, on a good day, there's issues that you have to deal with in terms of the fire marshal and the health department, and you know, that's on a good day. In this environment, it astronomically increases, and it's not. I mean, part of the reason ITHACON isn't in person, even though it's a smaller event, is because even as a smaller event, New York State doesn't permit gatherings over 200 people. And it, you know, there's an interplay between the health and safety of its attendees and that fiscal safety for the people who are vendors. So as we move forward, those are going to be the issues that we're going to be looking to, regardless of size, regardless of scope. And it takes more people, honestly, to make those things happen. So, you know, we're talking, I mean, normal security, like I'm thinking of New York, Mike, you know, when I go through the security, there's going to be another level, isn't there?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's, and I have to admit, you know, I was all pumped for New York last year. And then I was like, wait a second, they made the Javits a hospital? Okay, hold on. We need to think about this. You know, so those are some of the things that, you know, moving forward, there's going to be like the logistical side, and then there's going to be the experience side, and making those two come together. That's going to be the task at hand. But there's creative ways to do it, right?
Well, if you know any, share.
Well,
Yeah, there will be, of course. You know, and you need to have a good relationship with your venue, which, you know, we do in Long Beach very close. And I know that Reed is a really important customer at the Javits Center. But here's the truth. The Javits Center is owned by the state of New York, and the Long Beach Convention Center is owned by the city of Long Beach, California. They are also not able to, they're not the masters of their own destiny either. And so we all sit in a space where we're in a wait and see. And the Long Beach Convention Center was a field hospital, then it was a vaccination site, and now it is a reunification center for immigrants at the border, for children who were separated from their parents at the border. So what does that timeline look like? I don't know. But these are all factors that, you know, we have to just sit back and say, when the time is right and all of the parties who are involved, that's the event producer, that's the venue, that's our exhibitor base, that's our attendees, and our vendors, right? We still have a huge pool of vendors who need to come in and support us in order to produce events. That's a lot of constituencies who need to be on board with us saying, we're ready to reopen. And my show is a fraction of the size of New York Comic Con. So the barrier to reopening, it's not just we think it's the right time. It's a really serious decision, and it has public health consequences. It has insurance consequences, and you know. And you mentioned 9/11 at the top. I was producing a very, very large scale comic convention when 9/11 happened. It was Wizard World Chicago. And I was just about to launch Wizard World Philadelphia at the time. It had not started yet. It ran first in April of 2002. So I've been through this before, and the consequences of it are unpredictable. So the best thing, this panel is about how do we recover after a serious nationwide incident? And the only answer I can tell you is you have to be flexible and you have to be patient. And any of the any questions that you have and that you don't understand, you go to forums like this. And I really appreciate that you're doing this, because it gives people a forum to ask questions and say, I don't understand why you can't reopen, or why can't you do more virtual, or why can't you? Why can't you? People need a forum to ask those questions and get them answered honestly.
I'll say that the Comic-Con fan base is very passionate, as they are about their interests in general, and it's easy to direct someone's ire towards a convention organizer because they didn't get an exclusive that they wanted, or they couldn't get into a panel they wanted to see, or a guest is too expensive or something like that. What I hope is that when we come back to live events, and we're planning on running something in September, and then we've got something for New York Comic Con in October, what I hope is that there's a little bit of grace, because we are
Yes.
just as anxious and excited to get back to events as we are, but things are going to be way different. Like, if I saw you hugging on the show floor, technically I need to ask you to stop hugging your friend on the show floor. Like, there's just things that are going to come up. There are going to be situations that are going to arise, and there are going to be things that you can't do that you're accustomed to doing. But what I hope is that everyone understands that I don't want to run events like this. I want to run what we're used to running. I want to run New York Comic Con from 2018, and I want to run C2E2 from 2020, which is like my favorite show that we've ever run. We had so much momentum going into 2020. Like, that's what I want to do. I don't want to run New York Comic Con at 40% capacity, or C2E2 at 60% capacity, but that's what's going to have to happen for a little while in order for things to get better and for us to get back to what we're used to and accustomed doing. So I'll say that, knowing that that's not always possible, but I would hope that our passionate fan base, which I love, and I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for the passion of our fans, but I hope that there can be a little bit of grace going into the next 18 months.
Amen. I have a plaque on my wall that says grace. Yeah.
Yeah. Grace, understanding, creativity.
Yes.
I think those are all the things that are going to get us through the next year.
Yeah.
Please.
So that kind of gets me into my next question with you're talking about reopening and possibly even having like a live New York Comic Con in October. Obviously, the world is ever changing. We'll see what's happening in October. But in terms of garnering fan engagement, I personally went to the digital New York Comic Con, and I think my favorite digital kind of showcase was the Bluefin booth. It was this kind of virtual.
Yeah.
And I remember texting a lot of because I'm from New York. I've been going to New York Comic Con since I think 2009 or 2010.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. And I was texting all my friends to check it out, and it kind of reminded me of before New York Comic Con was kind of a thing where you had to buy the passes months in advance or you didn't go. You could kind of just tell people, hey, this is going on, come over, and there might be passes available to buy at the door. And that aspect kind of intrigued me. How do you think that this new digital engagement, where you can see the Bluefin booth, even if you're not necessarily at the event, how do you think that might help fan engagement, maybe even going forward in the live event, maybe integrating some of the digital practices that worked well into the live event to kind of help garner fan engagement, maybe even outside of people who are able to go live, because it probably will be limited capacity?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks for noticing that team put a lot of work into that Bluefin experience. And, I'll go back to what Martha said before. In every sense of the word, we are curators. We curate content that comes to the events. We curate the exhibitors that we sell into the show floor. So I wish I could take credit for what Bluefin did, but I can't. Like, they did that. And in a lot of ways, we can lead the horse to water, but we can't make them drink. Like, there is a lot of exhibitors that we would wish that would take advantage of the platforms that we build in the same way that Bluefin did. I think that was the best execution I've seen from an exhibitor, at least in some of the virtual events that we've run. Like, they got it, they had the resources, they had the exclusives, they were able to pull off something pretty impressive. And for those of you who didn't see it, they essentially built a booth in their office in Japan, and they would log in through our portal, and they would take people on little tours of their booth, and then people could buy things from that booth or afterwards. Just a really smart way to do it. Again, and I'll go back to what I said before about facilitating commerce. For the majority of our exhibitors at a show, they judge the success of the show based on the wad of cash that they walk out with at the end of the show. And if I can put products in front of people and have them purchase in a seamless way, then we'll be heroes. And that's some of the stuff that I would like to keep building. Sorry, Martha, I'm gonna let you take over while my dog has a freak out. Apologies.
Sure, no problem. So do you want to, I don't have a virtual event to point to. So if you want to shift to your next question for me. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. But before we do you see any aspects of the digital events moving forward being integrated with the live events, or do you think it's going to be primarily they're going to try and switch back to live only? Just as sort of a shorter maybe version of that question.
I think there are probably three answers to that question. One is the larger producers like Reed Pop and probably San Diego Comic-Con, probably Clarion's group. They will. The mid-range producers like my show, that depends. If there's a financial model that makes that feasible, then yeah, of course, I would. The smaller ones, no, it's expensive. That's not a casual thing to add a hybrid element to your in real life event. You need a production company, you need high quality cameras, you need dedicated internet. You can't use Wi-Fi, obviously. And then you need to know who you're streaming it to, right? You need to have that audience who are going to log in and make it all worthwhile. So I think there are three categories. There's the absolutely yes. Mike's going to say, hell yeah, I'm doing that. I'm going to say maybe if there's a model that makes sense, and then there are going to be a whole segment of the population like at ITHACON. Are you going to do it? Probably not. Maybe.
I think it depends on the motivation of the content, right? The purpose of the whatever content is being used. So, for even this, I interestingly enough, there's a discussion of Stan Lee's lost tapes happening at ITHACON, and that's content from 1975. That's being curated for the purposes of. So I think that there are different purposes of content.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, going back to the digital realms, and I don't know if you can call this a convention, but it's called Constellation. I don't know if either of you have seen this on Facebook. It was started in 2020, and the idea behind it was we couldn't go to conventions, so the fans decided to have their own convention on, and it was a joke initially. It was a joke. It has something like 40,000 people joined in it right now. And it has tracks, just like, you have got your vendors and you've got your masquerade, and it's pretty phenomenal. I've spoken to the people who run it. It started with one guy in San Francisco, and then he needed help and curating this content. And they've got t-shirts, and they're raising money and, giving it to first responders. I think, it that taps into that community that you spoke of earlier, right? And I think if there's ways to connect the community that may or may not be able to travel to some of these locations, I would love to come to Long Beach. I'm making that a checklist item,
Right.
But again, we go into issues of travel, issues of funding. Being a geek ain't cheap. Let's be honest. We love it though, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah,
I think if we can find creative ways to keep those, and of course the convention, whether it's 1 day or 4 days, there's a liminality to it, right? There's something special about it. Many people I talk to have friends that they make at the convention that they only see once a year. And I think that's one of the key things that we're missing right now is that they go to those conventions to see those friends. And I don't know. I just think there may be potential. But I do think that Martha's right. There's going to be categories of people who feel that they can afford it, they can do it, that it has purpose and meaning, that it just shouldn't be taken on willy-nilly.
Yeah, I think I think every event would want to do it, but I think we might be underestimating the price tag in us facilitating all of that content to be distributed. You've got to hire union labor in many cases to have cameras, you know, 2 probably 12-hour shifts in each room, and then the bandwidth to get it out there. Just back of the envelope to do a full-blown digital event around New York Comic Con, even if New York Comic Con was happening in person and we were going to sell a digital event around it, that's north of $500,000 in all likelihood just to capture and distribute all of that stuff. I'm probably selling it short a little bit too.
You're right. Yep.
So it's a significant investment that we need to know as business, as you know, people with P&L responsibility. We need to make sure that we can make that back, and if the audience is there for it. I think what you described is like, yeah, we want to get back to live events, and so do we. But we just need to make sure that it's worth it for us in an effort to distribute that content to people who are willing to pay for that content. For the first metaverse event that we did, or sorry, the last metaverse that we did, in terms of revenue, it was over a 7-figure proposition for us. It was great. Like you know, it's not filling the giant hole that is not running New York Comic Con, but like we felt good about that. It felt like we had purpose again. But most of that revenue was derived from sponsorship. Sponsorship and merch were the 2 things that we made the money off of. And merch, I mean, people love getting a t-shirt and like they were satisfied there, but the sponsors were not thrilled with it because they just didn't see the interaction with the brand. They didn't see any ROI. In many instances, they didn't see the sales if they were selling something. So 75% of that sponsorship revenue, I'm probably never going to see again because people have gotten wise to the virtual event. So anything that we do that's going to be a virtual event needs to be attendee funded or audience funded. It needs to be through a digital ticket, or it needs to be through a membership or a subscription or something like that. Or we do our best to fund it off merchandise, because the proposition that we went into it with was, I can sell this to McDonald's, I can sell this to, you know, Nike, I can sell this to Bluefin. But they're just not seeing that ROI. So I've got to flip it a little bit now. And I need Matt and Taylor to want to spend $12.50 on a digital ticket to New York Comic Con. I need to sell thousands of those in order to make up for the expenses that's going to cost to put that on.
Yeah.
And you're right. And in the mid tier and my tier, we call that officially it's called an ouchie.
Then we call it an ouchie too.
It's a real technical term.
Yeah.
I feel like it could be an acronym too. There's got to be some. There's potential there.
Definitely potential there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I definitely think that was a great answer that had a lot of consideration from all sides of the view. We had, you know, the bigger conventions like Reed, and Martha was able to kind of give us the perspective of the smaller conventions, how that would affect. And I think, Darlene, you summarized that pretty well with how the fan would react to it and what the fan would like to see. So I really do appreciate that answer. I think that was a really well-considered, thorough answer to that question. I think we're going to move on. Taylor, you have another question, correct?
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you guys for your insight. Very insightful and helpful as we move forward. But just we talked a little bit about how it's hard for merchandisers to make their money because it's not the same like setting up in person and getting that face-to-face like sale. So just touching more on how the shift to digital conventions affected merchandise sales, and maybe if you guys have insights on what has been done to kind of help merchandisers, if you've been seeing anything, especially because we know it's been so difficult to make these sales and to continue making profit.
Yeah, sure. I think that, you know, the thing that we struggled the most with when we canceled Emerald City over a year ago was we realized that, like, okay, this is one of the tent poles of the year for a retailer who's doing shows. Like, you know, for a lot of our retailers, they are in the van 40 weeks out of the year, going to and from, and we knew that Seattle is a big event for them. So I think when we were making the consideration of what to do with that show before the scope of the pandemic had really come into focus for us, was like, God, we can't do this to these guys. Like, this is a $10, $15, $20,000 show for a lot of them. And when we had to cancel it, we took it really hard. We got a lot of disappointed emails from our exhibitors and our retailer base saying, how could you do this? Like, we need this. And, you know, at that time, we just had to make the best decision that we could. I've been really impressed with the creativity of the exhibitors and the retailers in the space over the course of the past year. At first, it was a couple of months of retrenching and starting to try to figure out what was next. But I think you saw people pivot towards things like the Comic Book Shopping Network. You know, there's a couple of key retailers who put together just virtual live sales over the course of a day. They'd get on Facebook Live and they'd put the books that they had behind them on the wall, and people would message in the comments saying, I want that one, I want that one, how do I pay? So the comic retailing community is scrappy. Like, they are small business people who are used to the trials and tribulations of working in a very volatile industry. So I've been impressed with how they've kept together over the course of the last few years. Digitally, you know, like I said before, it's really hard for us to facilitate commerce when we're just sending somebody to an artist's website, and there's nothing that feels very seamless about it. It was nice for us during Emerald City's digital event to be able to say, here are 4 artists you should check out. Here's their Big Cartel page. Here's their Etsy page. Here's their eBay page. Like, that's just not a great fan experience. So we're working on things that can help solve that. But, you know, like I said, the artist community and the exhibitor community are super scrappy, and the stuff that they've been able to do on their own has been really impressive. And we do our best to give them a little bit of a voice whenever we're able to. Yeah, from our own merchandise perspective, it all depends on the content and the quality of the IP. Like, we've got, we're an official licensee for Marvel, for Star Trek, you know, and for Star Wars. So we're able to leverage some of those relationships to put out some pretty cool stuff. And especially in the comic book collecting community over the course of the past year, the collectability on those things has exploded. It's like baseball cards and NFTs all put into one. So to see the growth that's come out of some of those things, where we'll get an exclusive Marvel book, and after 2 hours, we've sold 2,500. We've sold our allotment. So those situations are rare, but they're welcomed when they do come up.
Yeah, Martha, darling, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what I said before. You know, you can buy almost everything online. You don't need to come to a comic convention to buy. Very rare. There are a few exceptions. I'm not saying that there's nothing, literally nothing, but most things you can buy online.
Mm-hmm.
So to put together a comic convention online just so you could buy things, it falls short experientially. You can Google the name of what you want and you'll find 5, 6, 7, 8 places where you can buy it. So, you know, I think Mike hit on a really key piece of the puzzle there. If you do have an exclusive, which ReedPop, you know, they've maintained a really strong relationship with some of the most powerful brands in the industry. And so they're able to capitalize on that. But I put them in a category of one. I don't think anyone else has that depth of relationship and manages a merchandise program at that level. So the rest of us share. Even if we get an exclusive, it's a regional exclusive, or, you know, we're sharing it with someone else. So I think they did a phenomenal job under the circumstances with everything we had to deal with. You know, some of the Star Wars Celebration show that they do. Did you miss that, Mike, altogether? You're every 2 years with that, right?
Yeah, we missed this last one, but we did a virtual merchandise event. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you've got hot merchandise that you can't get anywhere else, then it doesn't matter if it's live or online, right? It's the merchandise that people want. That's not an experiential. They're not doing that for the experience. They're doing that because they collect the merchandise and they don't care how they procure that merchandise. So that's a really different thing for me, I don't play in that sandbox. So good for you, Mike.
Well,
Good for you.
yeah, with great, something
Yeah.
comes great. Yeah. I think that, and I'm curious because you've seen a lot of virtual event platforms, Martha, but I've seen a lot probably of the same ones. And there are people who have tried to put an experience around commerce, and they'll make a big investment in, I don't know, sneaker drops or, just virtual worlds around the fact that you're buying something.
Yeah.
And I've always been really underwhelmed with them. And, people want what they want. They want to be able to buy it. They want to be able to buy it quick and know that they've got it. And I'm just curious, like in your testing of different virtual platforms, have you seen anybody who you felt like has got it right?
The only one who's got it right is Amazon.
Yeah.
Have you looked at Lemonade Social or Topia?
No.
No.
Okay. Those are two interesting platforms that are starting to integrate that commerce with connection, I like to call it. You don't leave the site at all for an event. And I mean, we're talking about, I think Lemonade Social has done a really good job for the music industry. I mean, we're talking about different fandoms now, right? The three of us are primarily focused on, comics fandom or science fiction geek, whatever you want to call it. But, like the music industry has done interesting things and I think could be adapted for the purposes of this fandom as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lemonade Topia is the other one where you're building a world. It's kind of like, if I had to, it's like cartoon sketches of worlds. And I'm not doing it justice, but it has a lot of interactivity and a lot of portals to other locations. Those are the two that I've recently come across that are pretty interesting. Then there's a lot that are based in the European countries.
Yeah.
Like it's like a fiesta over there. Like of,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm lucky enough to have some colleagues over there that have shared some of this content with me, and I'm like, wow, this is wow, what are you guys doing over there? What's in the water? But
Yeah, I'll check those out. Thank you.
yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good answer. Again, very, very good consideration from all sides. So we got about 15 minutes left. We wanted to just kind of wrap up and see what have you guys learned over the past year? Is there anything they always say that testing yourself and kind of removing easy access in your job sometimes pushes you and helps you grow further. Do you think you've learned anything you can take with you going forward for making conventions? Do you think there's any maybe tools? I know we kind of touched on this before. Any tools or resources you gained during this time that you might carry with you? You could just reflect on how the conventions during COVID have kind of impacted your careers for the long run.
Yeah. I've been going first a lot. Martha, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, so I would say the format we're using right now, right? This idea of getting on Zoom, recording it, maybe doing some editing afterwards, and then producing content very fast, very easy. I was using Zoom for a few years before this, but purely for video calls with colleagues. I wasn't using it to produce content. And the idea that you can transition something that you use as a business tool into something that you can use for entertainment, education, it was really intriguing. And I tested it out in many different ways. And I come out of this, if we're out of this, I hope we are, come out of this with having set up two new groups that will survive the pandemic that I probably wouldn't have done if I didn't have the time. And one's an industry think tank group that we meet every 2 weeks. There's about 75 industry people who get together and we talk about whatever's going on, which has been, kind of highs and lows, obviously. And then the other is an international group for women in exhibitions. I started the North American chapter. And that, if we hadn't flexed ourselves to think that we could meet on a platform like Zoom or Teams, or there's so many of them. Sometimes people send me invitations for ones. I'm like, what's Ring Central? But I'll log in and I'm on another one. But the idea of using this for serious business or for fun, I can't even tell you how many silly happy hours I've done on this, which have been legit fun. And that has been my learning, that as someone who is so rooted and grounded in live events, and I am just constantly producing live events, if it's conferences, if it's large scale consumer events, if it's trade shows, if it's you name it, parties, meetings. I've been producing events since I was a child. I'm not kidding. I've always been throwing events of some sort. My high school prom, I was the organizer. So this goes way back for me. And the idea that you could do it online now just opened up my whole world. So now now I'm doing groups that include people from all over the world. I have people from the UK, from Germany, from Singapore. It just really has been, I'm going to say, liberating.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think if I had to look back, I think this has taught us that we need to carve out a little bit of time for ourselves in a professional sense and start thinking about what we're going to do to move things forward. If I look at some of the initiatives that we've been working on, it's all stuff that was sitting at the edge of our desk for years, like a marketplace for exhibitors to sell things to fans. That's been on my list for 2.5 years. Monetizing our own virtual events instead of selling it to a media entity. That's been on my list for quite a while too. Like, I think we get so hung up, like Martha said, she's running events constantly. I feel like I'm running events constantly. We do 14 events a year. I'm just like, I need to get out of the mindset of like going from show to show to show and work on a project that is not a show. It's not, me focused on New York Comic Con being 8 months away. It's me focused on how can I do something that's going to transform our business. And we don't give ourselves enough time for that because we're so focused on execution. And I think that's like just events people in general. Like I think that's how we're wired, is just to, execute, move on to the next one, execute, move on to the next one. And we need to give ourselves a little bit of space.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I would second both Martha and Mike's comments. I've been on hiatus for 2 years. I've been studying creative events management at Falmouth University, which is in the United Kingdom, but I'm doing it from my home. And I was doing that before the pandemic. And it's been enlightening, but ironically, the digital futures course happened as lockdown was happening. So we were living it very differently. And subsequently, that whole curriculum has changed. And I think for me, David Bowie once said something to the effect of, if you're swimming in, if you're not out of your depth, you're too comfortable, and get out of your depth. It's okay. That's where the good stuff starts to happen. And I think that, like you said, Mike, you've had stuff on your desk for 2 years and it's just been hanging out there. And it's like, oh, these are the places I want to swim to. And I think it's okay. And I think that particularly in those early days, and I want to reiterate that I'm a big believer in like a triple bottom line event. There's the social, financial, ecological aspects, and they're harder now to make. They weren't easy before, but I'm even more dedicated to that. And I'm happy to be a sounding board for either of you if you need it to get those projects off your desk.
Thank you.
Yeah, please get them away from me.
It sounds to me like we need a new career professional that's like, I will take projects off your desk
Yeah,
and make them
exactly.
come to fruition.
You're just an events person. Why don't you take this away?
Yeah, go for it.
Like if only we had predicted a global pandemic, right? Like we would have had this stuff
Right.
done.
Right.
Like it's like again, and through I don't know if this was Bowie, but through pain comes opportunity. There is going to be some gaps in the market. There are going to be shows that can't sustain themselves anymore. There are going to be businesses that suffer irreparably through this. So, and there are going to be new opportunities that open up. Like a hybrid event can be an opportunity if we're willing to make the investment and we're willing to do it right, and fans prove that they're willing to pay for it. There's something there for sure. We just need to do the best that we can in order to find those opportunities and not half-ass them. And I'm not saying that events people are used to half-assing anything, but sometimes you just got to get the doors open.
Shocked.
So there's still, it's exciting. It is, but it's kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. This was really, I do think this was super informative. I think that outside of ITHACON, event industry people can take a look at this because there were so many different points of view and so many great points brought up by you three. I can't thank you enough. We have a few minutes at the end here. If you guys want to give any plugs or promote anything, send anybody to any websites or anything you might be working on right now.
I will. I would love to give a plug for Women in Exhibition Network. That's womeninexhibitionsplural.com. There's a page on that site for the North American chapter, and it tells all about the benefits of joining and how to. So thank you for giving me a chance to do that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and I'll plug ReadPop family of shows, readpop.com, where you can see all the different events that we have coming. We are, fingers crossed, running our first event in Miami this September, which I am excited to be back at an event. And then it appears that all systems are go for New York in October, and then C2E2 in Emerald City back-to-back in December. So I am anxious to get back and excited and ready to be on a plane again and like in a hotel. Oh my God. Like, it just sounds like
I did that last week. It was amazing.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
Any idea on when dates for those tickets might go on sale or anything announced?
Matt's like, I got to get me some tickets.
I'm excited.
I think we'll have more announcements coming in June. So you'll see them over the course of the summer. But it's tough because we're like planning ahead of what we think the world is going to look like in October, which is a challenge. So we're trying to be as conservative as we can, and then hopefully add on as we get closer. But yeah, you'll see that over the summer.
No problem. Lynn, got anything?
Yeah. If people are interested, comicsinmylife.com. That's where I announce upcoming studies that people can participate in, some of my coverage of different unique fan culture events. And the other one is gorgekeep.org. That is Ithaca's School of Magic that was created over the last 5-6 years. And we may have an announcement coming soon about a digital future for Gorge Keep.
Awesome.
Exciting.
Good stuff.
Thanks.
Matt, Taylor, thanks so much. This was great.
Thanks for having us.
No problem. Thank you guys so much. This was again, I can't thank you guys enough. This was such a great panel. And yeah, look forward to all the conventions and everything you guys have got going on. I'm definitely going to check it all out. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.